How's it going, everybody? Thanks for joining us for another Church of True Christ Sunday sermon. We are back together this week, and we have some very interesting topics we're going to be covering, due to some very interesting current events that have occurred. And, just more people waking up, which is a wonderful and a beautiful thing. So if you guys would just take a moment of silence and bow your heads for the Our Father direct from Aramaic translation prayer. O birther, Father, Mother of the cosmos, you create all that moves in light. Focus your light within us. Make it useful as the rays of a beacon show the way. Unite our eye can to yours so that we walk as kings and queens with every creature. Create in me divine cooperation from many selves, one voice, one action. Grant what we need each day in bread and insight. Forgive our hidden past, the secret shames, as we consistently forgive what others hide. Deceive neither by the outer nor the inner. Free us to walk your path with joy. From you is born all ruling will, the power and life to do. The song that beautifies all, from age to age, it renews. Amen. All right, guys. So I guess Dyanna dropped out for a sec. She will be back. But one of the things I kind of want to go over today is trust in the unknown. Right now, especially on my show, on Don's show, and on Dyanna's show, we have spoken about how we are in some very strange, unknown, and uncharted territory for this current batch of humanity, with the events of Charlie Kirk happening on the 10th of September. And we have a collective that's currently in a lot of fear at this point in time. So one of the things I kind of want to hit it off with today is how can we learn to have trust in the unknown, have trust in the divine, complete and total trust that's unshakable, that cannot be broken, and this is in a lot of ways, when I say something like this, people think it's easier said than done, but it's actually can be done in an easy way too. So Dyanna just popped back in with us. So as I was saying, so trust and faith in the unknown. And I'm going to go ahead and use faith at this point in time, even though a lot of of us have stepped into knowing. It's no longer a matter of faith. We've stepped and we've crossed into knowing due to the experiences we've had. But one of the things I'm going to highlight here is the conditioning that's placed upon us collectively. This is one of the hardest things to break. And when I'm talking about what kind of conditioning am I talking about? The negative mind conditioning, the negative thought pattern conditioning that we have in our collective consciousness and that we experience collectively. And what I mean by this is even us who are on our awakening evolution, who walk a foundation with Christ, we're even guilty of it too. We are conditioned to gravitate towards these negative thought patterns. And I see it within myself sometimes. I'm sure you two have seen it within yourselves when we start to kind of funnel down a negative kind of thought loop or a negative kind of thought pattern. But this is the one thing we're going to try to break when we have trust and faith in the unknown, is the awareness of this. Us as human beings, we actually kind of rally around negativity, and it's kind of an unfortunate side effect of the conditioning that's been placed on us. I always like to use this example of how we rally around negativity. And I was actually talking about this on a show I did on Friday with Heavyweights Light Feels. So here's the two scenarios, right? So let's say I'm driving into work. Some guy flips me off, cuts me off on the road, not a great situation if you've ever experienced that. But I walk into my office and I'm like, man, you wouldn't believe what happened to me today. This guy flipped me off and he cut me off, and everybody is going to start to rally around that negativity. They're going to be like, yeah, fuck that guy for cutting you off and flipping you off. And it gets them all amped up. Right? It gets them all amped up, all excited, because this is what humanity does. And now the second scenario I'm going to bring to the table when it comes to this is, let's say, you're driving into work. Some dude randomly stops you and gives you $100. right? Just out of nowhere. Just gives you $100. Then you go to work, man, and you're all like, hey guys, check it out. Like, dude, something really awesome to me happened today. Some guy just randomly stopped me and gave me $100 for no reason. And everybody's going to be like, oh, cool. Notice the lack of excitement. Notice the lack of getting amped up. Excuse me. But this is what I mean. We as this current collective, we gravitate towards the negative thought patterns. We gain excitement. We gain engagement from these negative thought patterns and these negative thought loops. So this is the way we break this, and we learn to gain somewhat of a trust in the unknown as we reformat ourselves towards the positive. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Dyanna. What are your thoughts on this? And then we'll hop to Don. I mean, how do you feel about this as one way that we can start to kind of cultivate this trust in the unknown, is having awareness that humans gravitate towards the negative and reformatting ourselves to look at life in more of a positive light?
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack in that. And part of the reason why they think the star seed was put down here, because the base human was in too stuck of a position to get themselves to the all is mind. Yes, but if your mind is super negative, you're best not to know that. It's better to have people with positive minds and positive influence to get it to a place where it's more safe to start squeaking it in, like the all is mind, because you can use that for whatever. It's the all is mind. That's why God, and people get boohoo about God because it entails all, but there's more good realms than bad. We just happen to be in one. That's why I love Buffy, and it shows like they're going to hell, and they actually, their realm was not normal Earth. It was a hell realm. And I resonated with that so deeply. It just felt so true that this is a hell realm. And I have always felt passionately about that, especially like that book I wrote, Hell as a Society. And then I watched South Park go do the same thing. We watched that show, Hell of a Boss, and Has Been Hotel now doing the same thing. Like, there's lots of these narratives coming out that society is hell. This is hell. And so there's only one golden ticket out. And that's why we talk about Christ, because it's the easiest way to access that realm. But you can also simply use the power of your own mind. And this is base level spirituality, but it's the bottom and the top. Actually, I was just saying in our group the other day, the power of now. It's like the first and the last, because you understand it rudimentary, yet you also profoundly understand it as well. It is the material. And that goes for positive thinking as well. And earlier today, I was studying in my master's material by Paul Masters, funny enough, and it's written in the 60s. And he's talking about how he has and knows, and we all know, lots of people that can quote and know tons of metaphysical facts. So that nowadays we have metaphysics, Gnostics, Hermetics. People can know all the spiritual information they want, but you can watch some of their, because we get to have that experience where we see them on YouTube ourselves. And it's always been my aim, and what I use YouTube for is the mirror. So you're never seeing me being fake or false or anything. You're seeing me shine through higher. So that's not to say I don't have human issues myself. Today, the energy is intense, and I'm like, what can we do to balance it? Go outside, right? And this was just an accident with the sun above me, because that says the church house when I moved in here. So that's part of my Christ journey, which I just thought was interesting, because I moved in and this was hidden behind the rose bush my husband just cut down earlier because it got greedy on the garage. But it says the church house. I mean, come on. That seemed pretty synchronistic, not to mention the church across the street. So we're in the right place to get our thoughts, our minds, and our willpower in the right place, which is positive thinking, because the all is mind. But you want to latch on to it because Christ is pure love, right? So if you're in that space, you're good. And whatever you can do to get your mind in a positive, authentically positive place is for your betterment.
Absolutely. That was really well said, Dyanna. Don, what are your thoughts on this, on how we as a collective naturally gravitate towards the negative for our energetic sustenance, and having awareness of that to reformat ourselves?
I actually totally agree with what you both were saying there, and there's a couple of places I want to go on that. As far as like the getting amped up, it seems like that's something that's programmed into us through society, right? That negative dopamine hit that we get when something bad happens. It's like what Dyanna was studying about, and we're actually trained to be able, through this construct that we're currently in, we are trained to be able to trigger each other. We're actually each other's handlers at this point, right? Because of the the group reaction that you're talking about, we were like, oh, well, that felt good because they felt good about it, and we all felt good together. Let's all be fucking negative together, right? But you don't get that reward system because, you know, like, you got $100, I don't give a damn, right? Like, but you know, when we're all jumping up and down together about what an asshole that guy is that cut you off and flipped you off, that's fun. That feels good. I'm part of the team. This is great, right? The $100 is like, that's great. You got $100, BFD, right? Like, what do I care? and that's just the way we're programmed. There's that serotonin, that dopamine release to being part of the thing, right? And anger is a great bonder. It's a great melder. It's, you know, I used to work in bars, and it was almost religious at points where, like, one fight would break out and then there'd be 3 going on, and then there was like 5 going on, and like these multiple fights would just spread. It was like the anger just lashed out, and you'd end up like, people used to drive 2 hours to watch the fights in our town because it was just this toxic environment. But like, it was also a like collective gathering of anger, and everybody was a part of it. Like, it was bizarre to be a witness to. So I totally understand, and that is deeply, deeply ingrained in us, and it's by societal standards.
Well, you know what's funny is, speaking of this, because I remember, and I never watched the show, a lot of the episodes, but I do remember a Letterkenny episode where they were talking about who was the greatest fighter and all of that, and it's a Canadian show if you guys haven't checked it out, but it was kind of funny. But nonetheless, let's kind of bounce back off that. But it is. So we've come to understand that, you know, when we talk about Hermeticism and the all is mind, our mental faculties actually interact with our physical experience. And I know you guys have heard me say this ad nauseum, but you know, it bears repetition for the sheer fact that this is what we're dealing with here. This is exactly what it is. Think of your mindset, the frequency of your thoughts, and your mind as the hammer and chisel of your reality. And when you have cultivated yourself a positive mindset, and you're looking at things through the positive, this hammer and this chisel gets fine-tuned. It gets really sharp, and it gets much more effective at carving out the reality that you wish to see and what you wish to experience. And when you carry this mental, or this negative mindset, I should say, it's as if your hammer and your chisel gets super dull just from the negative mindset, and you can't exactly use it the way that it's intended to be used. So what I'll say is, I'll digress and I'll come to this is how we start to begin to forge a trust in the unknown, is we have awareness of the negative thought patterns that our collective constantly recites around and gets excited about, and we start to reformat ourselves into more of a positive mindset and cultivating these positive thought patterns. Because one of the things that you're going to begin to see, all right, as you begin to do this, is you're going to start to see how beautiful life actually really is. You know, you kind of start to take in how grateful you are for everything that you have. And this is kind of the thing, I was talking about on my show last Friday with Andrew on Heavyweights Life Feels, is the people who still struggle with this trust in the unknown and this faith in the unknown. And it comes from this kind of negative conditioning factor. And I talked about these 2 factors on the show. It's being realistic and have you no shame. These are actually where it really all kind of stems from, because we have been conditioned to think that being realistic means being fearful and being negative. Absolutely not. That's not what being realistic means. We can be realistic with ourselves on an objective level that doesn't involve being fearful or negative. And then there is the shame conditioning. And this seems to be coming up a lot recently in a lot of my shows. There's many different facets of the shame conditioning in our collective. But then again, the have you no shame is the first thing that kind of comes to mind. And what this does is this dims out our authenticity. It dims out our authentic light that we're supposed to be living to. So when we cultivate a positive mindset and we understand what being realistic truly is, And when we begin to allow our inner authentic light to shine, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, right? What this does is this causes a dual effect within us, and it kind of unlocks what we can call this unshakable trust in the unknown. So, Dyanna, I want to get your thoughts on this. What do you think about this realistic and have you no shame, and this kind of being a block for some people to kind of cultivate that full trust in the unknown?
Yeah, 100%. And that's why, like, my news segment that I just came out with, which is going to be my focus now and will include clips from all of you guys. Dawn and I have already done one segment of them, and they'll be coming out in the upcoming news episodes that I do during the week. It's school hours, so you don't hear screams in the background. But but we and I like what you said there about transcending ascension pragmatically 100%, transcending ascension. I was already handed the title, and then pragmatically, and I love that term because it implements what you're saying there. It's like, it's not fear, because you can take fear, and somebody else said this, but I've like integrated it, where you could take fear, but it just be like a receptor system, like an alarm system. And that's why I like pragmatism, because pragmatism, it's like seeing the variables, being intelligent about it. Sometimes that might not be what we want, but we're looking at it pragmatically because we're intelligent in the all mind. We see that option, but we choose a different one. And there is always another one, even if it's to just stop complaining so much. So sometimes it can still be like, oh my God, but you just have to do what you can do about the situation to the best of your ability. That's going to ease the situation as much as possible. Because what you were saying earlier about the hammer or the chisel, the more if you it dulls out and it stops working, that's like mid. That's your mid. You know, the kids, you're mid. That's mid.
Yeah.
But eventually, and that's like your more detrimental level people, which tons of people are in that area now. Dark nighty of the soul, with with it or without awakening, nihilism, anarchism. They have just over complainers, people stuck in wounding, people stuck in mental illness. When it's in the illness section, though we've discussed with Dawn, it never has to be illness. But there is points where you certainly do feel literally ill. And that's because you're taking that chisel that is now no longer just dull. You're hitting it back on yourself because you've gotten the energy so dark. It's not just not because there's dull. There's where it's just kind of, there's technically no stasis. It would be a little positive or a little negative, but it can vibrate in the realm of dull. Versus the majority of people actually find themselves smacking themselves with it themselves. And then comes in patterns and changing those patterns. Because that's that's why healing positively is first and last. That those that come last will be first, right? Because this is the most important lesson, and you realize it was the first lesson because the all is mind. But it's not the first lesson, and that is to just be pure. And that comes into going into the unknown. That directly links into going into the unknown, because what do you know? Even if we're star seeds and we have higher knowings, higher inclinations, we have to still follow those higher knowings and higher inclinations, or else they fizzle out and they don't do much other than I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Like even those of us now, even some of us, we've been waking for a very long time, but shoulda, coulda, woulda, done it sooner, done it better, done it faster. But at least if you get going, get doing it, live in the unknown, because when you're breaking those patterns, they are the unknown. They are the unknown.
Absolutely.
So, like, it used to be my comfort place to get hysterical, to blame other people, because it's just so weird. And it actually took the energies getting so heavy and huge over the last like decade, really, because since 2012, things have been just like, wow. And it just got less and less and less of an option to use those old patterns. Had 2012 never happened, I might have stayed just complaining for many, many years and letting the wisdom that whispered to me just kind of sit in the background, versus the energy's increasing and leaving you no choice but like, fuck it, I'll go into the unknown because, because it's unknown territory, to be good, to think positively, to give the benefit of the doubt, to calm down, to deep breathe through the nose. These basic situations, like try to tell someone about the benefit of the doubt. So that guy comes into work, he tells you about the awful traffic story. You don't jump in on the negativity. You say, oh, like, do you think maybe they couldn't see because of this? What street was it on? Oh, well, that one's really busy, I bet, blah. Or maybe they're late, or blah. You know what I mean? Like, give a situation. It doesn't even have to be people you know. But when you hear these situations, instead of jumping on the negative train, because it's fun and they're gonna like you and that's familiar. Instead, be the one, the unknown, the one that might be like, oh well, I'm not gonna include you into the conversation. You're like a buzzkill, which I've had people tell them, oh, why don't you just take my side? Well, because I'm just trying to expand the situation, because falling into the negativity or even reinforcing somebody else's negativity is not helping the situation. Going into the unknown
It's not.
is finding new and positive patterns.
I dig it. I dig it. And kind of one thing I want to highlight on, and she was talking about smacking yourselves with the hammer and the chisel. That's what happens when we have fear, anxiety, and worry, and we're not trusting the divine. We start slapping ourselves with our hammer and our chisel for the reality. Don, what are your thoughts on this as far as the being realistic conditioning and the shame conditioning that we have being a block that is blocking most in our collective from having that trust and faith in the unknown?
I think one of the fundamental steps in this whole process is accepting, like for myself, everything that's ever been terrible in my life that has happened to me up to this point was literally the path that I needed to take in order to get where I am right now with this community, with this sense of understanding, and I see where I'm going, right? So if I hadn't have accepted the fact that all of these things that I'm supposed to be afraid of and supposed to feel shame about and I'm supposed to be terrible about are actually blocking me, then you don't reach a point of progression in that understanding and of your spirituality and acceptance of the divine, because you're literally blocked from it, because you're in that like cycle of the shame and the guilt and the self-pity and the self-loathing. Like, this is horrible. Why have I done this? My life is this. And I'm like, my life's pretty dope right now, and this is how I got here. So that shit had to happen for me to be able to do this right now, right? Like, because like I know everybody's not in their optimal position, but most people that we know in this community are having some pretty cool experiences. And if it hadn't have been through the shit pile that they had to trudge to get here, it wouldn't be like this. And I'm going to reference a movie at the end of Deadpool and Wolverine, spoiler. Deadpool asks for Wolverine's timeline to be fixed where everybody hadn't gotten killed. And the agent from the Time Authority says, like, if he hadn't have had everything terrible happen in his reality, he wouldn't be the person he is now, right? That's what we have to take away from all of these things that we're supposed to feel guilt and shame about, is that they made us the strong-willed, sovereign individuals that we are and are becoming. And if we hadn't have had that, we wouldn't be us.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, man. And that's actually ties into my next point that I was going to say is I get this from a lot of people in our community who are still having a struggle with this, and it's allowing themselves to have complete trust in the divine and in the unknown is they still are somewhat in that victim mentality about these traumas and everything that they have faced. And one of the biggest things I say to this, and I'm going to say this to everybody who is sitting here right now, look at where you are now. All of these people that I see with this victim mentality about what they've been through, they haven't even realized that all of this stuff pushed them into this amazing place that they're in their lives. And this is what I mean. We as humans, we constantly tend to gravitate towards the negative as opposed to the positive. And with these people, I'm like, look, dude, look at this. Like you're up here doing a podcast now, or you're up here. It was just chocolate. I had to crack up at that. But look at and a lot of these people are doing amazing things with their lives. You know what I mean? Some of them have started their own shows. Some of them are going out doing public speaking. Some of them are healers and have healing circles and do healing for people now. And have completely transformed their whole lives through their struggles, but they have not had the realization yet, okay, that this was the divine that pushed them to where they are. It's because they're still kind of stuck in that victim mentality, this woe is me, or oh, I went through all of this. And but here's the thing, guys, this is one of the hardest pills that we all have to swallow. When I say this, we ultimately chose this for ourselves before we incarnated here, because we knew that these struggles, these events, this pain that we went through was going to have a spiritual alchemical effect within us that was going to mold and craft us into this position that we are currently in our lives. Here's the thing, and this I've talked about this even on previous episodes of Church of True Christ. Yes, the Phoenix Protocol, Sam, that's something we need to talk about because I've been looking at that quite a bit. But I mean, yes, we've talked about this quite a few times here on Church of True Christ when it comes to we've chosen this path for ourselves. And that is because ultimately the way to get out of the victim mindset is to sit there and take a step back, a third party view, and look at your whole life and be like, wow, everything that was not of service to me crumbled away. And yes, maybe that was painful during that time. And that is because the divine was removing these toxic trauma bonds I had with this toxic familiarity to this life and this prison that I had built around me. And almost these people who are still kind of stuck in this halfway position, it's almost like they were still almost somewhat subconsciously attached to the prison they've left behind. And they haven't been able to transition into the heaven that they've created for themselves in their mind completely. I'm going to bounce it off to Dyanna. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, so extremely. And heaven on earth, and it's both. So you are the chooser. You are the chooser, but you can choose not to choose. Inaction is as much of action, and that's a big Hermetic philosophy. And it's where later the law of action comes out of. It's not part of the 7, but it's one of the later 12. And it is because action deeply matters, action and inaction. So you choose or you don't choose, but the universe will take that non-choice as a choice. And it's like if you're really lazy with the AI, if you're kind of really lazy with the AI, let's say you want the AI to make something, but you didn't upload anything. It's just gonna go through your computer hard drive. And I mean, some people have scary stuff on that, right? So, like, what is it going to find to make the program that is your life out of that computer subconscious if you're not choosing? And that's what sleepers are. That's what they are. Bio robots, NPCs, they're all just living in limited awareness simply because they're not choosing. And because that's a large point of it. Awareness is its own kind of separate thing, technically, on the layers of existence. But when you choose, you expand awareness. And when you expand awareness, you expand your choices. So they work very symbiotically together. And then what you're saying earlier about like the blaming of the nation, like the blame nation, right? Which there's a funeral happening right now that's very sad and love to him and his family. And it's happening live right now with a huge attendance. And it's interesting. My husband thought it was very synchronistic that we were doing church at the same time. Because
wow,
it's a
that's really
time
cool.
where we need God. It's because he's watching the funeral right now. It's a time where we need God and we need that instilled into our life. And this person, Charlie Kirk, that's all he was trying to do was put that into people's lives. But that's what we're trying to do too. That's what everybody's trying to do. But he was such a huge figure, which we've talked before about us being kept safe because he was clearly not safe. And that because of how much the nation wants to keep blame, because he actually, like, people think of him as this like diehard. If you actually listen to what he said, he's talking about getting God more into your life. Not that I agree with everything he said. My husband watched him, so I only got the trickle down effects. But the point is that love needs to be implemented and blame needs to be dissipated. And a lot of the need to blame, so that's staying in the known versus the unknown, which is love, because when you were little, you did something wrong. And rather than your parents loving you in that moment, they screamed and yelled at you, or they abused you, or they shamed you, or all of the above. And so you created this, especially if you had siblings. So it's in the collective, but then it's also in our actual programming. So you could even take this lesson and put it in school as well. Because what would happen if you blamed your sibling instead is they would get in trouble instead of you. And that's like a common occurrence that happened with a lot of upbringings, mine. So that's I'm using as an example, but I saw it just everywhere. You see it in TV, like, Mom, it was so and so. Like, that's just the narrative of overall world, because you can actually break down the dynamics of the world easily by looking at family dynamics, because the mother father just continues to repeat itself throughout society and just throughout our experience, because duality, mother father, because we are duality, ends up being a major part of our narration here. And why worlds in other places can look so differently, because their narration is coming from completely different motivation. So with that being said, we can really unpack and find because I find that the safest place, because when I bring people through, because I'm always telling them it's their own fault, but nicely. And I'm trying to first I start peeling back the layers of why they might not feel safe enough to take that blame on themselves. And that's a place of unknown. When you can look at what's happening to you as your own fault. So for me, like little things like I used to think demons were after me. And by all means, entities and demons absolutely do fuel your own negative thought patterns and take advantage of the situation and make you a loose farm and definitely get your factory momentum going so that they can feed off you faster and better. However, the initial engine, the initial spark that starts, not a good one, that starts their ability to feed is coming from the self, right? So it's a good one in the sense that you know that the initial key that turns the engines that they might be able to manipulate, you have the turn signal of, and you can turn that dial to whatever frequency you want. And that part is simple. It's so simple that people shake it away. It's things like Kriya yoga, like Stephen loves. It's things like just simple meditation, which you hear preached over and over and over again. It's coming to stillness, and first and foremost, because all the other things like I list dance and yoga, like I love, but what they're really in music, but what they're really doing is they're bringing you to stillness. They're bringing your mind to a place of no mind, no thing, no place, no time. They're taking you out of everything and putting you into something else that is vibrationally high, so a high frequency, like listening to the water run, walking beside the creek, all these things that are subtle enough for you to focus on, like some things will tell you to look at a flame or focus on your breath. They're all to get you to a place just so you could have silence. Because technically, if they could say just be no mind, no thing, no nothing, that's 0 point energy zone. So bringing yourself to the 0 point energy zone in whatever modality or way that works for you is it. Because once you discover 0 point energy zone and discover that's within a part of the entire system that makes up the God spark, because your heart center is multiple layered. I just sent an image to the group the other day off something Sam said, and I just seen the image the other day, and I was like, no way, I have that image. And then I sent it because it shows the different ways. So anyways, with your heart spark activated, it allows access into that 0 point energy zone, which is a more expanded area, easier and more efficiently. And that is your key. And that feels like the unknown. That's scary. That's where your ego is going to scream and cry that it's dying, that it can't possibly do this, that it's got so much else to do, that it should rather be doing. Like there's so many excuses that are the known that your system will give. Like me and walking the dog, like the kids are finally all in school and I was like still finding excuses and I caught myself. I was like, oh my God, why? You were going to do it again. This was my dream ideal life. This was my dream ideal town. And to actually get to walk around for hours and hours because kids get tired and want to be carried and need their own attention. But the dog can just go, go, go. She's huge. You've seen her. She's white. She's huge. She's amazing. And her and I can just live because I took away the excuses. There was no excuses. I found everything I needed on the trip or for the trip here in the house already. Because I'm like, oh, I got to get this. I got to get that. No, you don't. No, you don't. There's something you can do right now, today, in this moment that brings you to heart-centered stillness, where that's the unknown place, but that's where you birth Christ, you birth the God self, the higher self, you raise your frequency, all the good things, the heaven on earth stuff start to be able to actually play out.
Absolutely, man. And yeah, I'm going to agree with Sam. That was perfectly put. And again, too, shining the heart center is that authenticity and living through that authenticity in your life. And yes, meditation and all of its forms. It doesn't have to be Kundalini or Kriya yoga like I like to do, but it does. It brings you into that stillness, and that stillness is part of getting used to the unknown. So absolutely, Dyanna. Don, what are your thoughts on this before we kind of head out into the next topic, how we can become all in with our spiritual evolution? So let me hear your thoughts on this.
I guess where I would go with this is one of the things I've realized myself, and it's something I'm still adjusting to, is the more you fight your path the more reality is just going to kick your ass. Okay. Yes. Until you accept your purpose in this reality, you're literally fighting the stream of reality. Like there is a vibrational direction that everything in this reality is supposed to flow. And that includes us, because we do live in a biomolecular construct that works on frequency and density and all of those wonderful things that we've talked about ad nauseum. Right. And if you're fighting against that, you're the thing that's not resonating. Right. And if you're not resonating with your purpose and the things around you that you're supposed to be going with, it's like trying to swim upstream. It's not going to work. It's very hard. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be tiring. And I'm not saying just give up and go with the flow. No, find your place of authenticity, that heart center that they're talking about, and flow from there and discover and create with the reality that's around you, because that's our purpose here. We're not supposed to be encapsulated in the sociological construct and doing exactly what we're told to be and being those bio robots. That's not for us. That's not what people like us are meant to do. And I'm not trying to single us out and say that we're great, but those that are aware, and that's all I'm going to say about it. But like when you're fighting that stream of reality, you're just causing yourself these traumas because you're not going with the flow. And sometimes I know that is a terribly hard thing to see, because you think you're coming from the place of, this is what I'm supposed to do because this is what society told me, and this is what my mom told me, and this is what my parents, and blah, 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 the way they did it, but it didn't work. This is the way you're supposed to flow with reality and create from that heart center and that place of authenticity.
I think you lined it up good, man. It's about surrender too. I think that's the ego trying to swim upstream. That's because the ego has still has some kind of attachment to this false matrix reality. It's letting go of the programs. It's almost a sense of surrender. And once you start to, and it's kind of like a trifecta a little bit. I was saying it's like a dual thing, but it's almost like a little bit of a trifecta. Is you recondition your mind into the positive mindset and cultivating a positive mindset each day. You start to live through that inner authenticity, that light within you, the heart center. And once these two combine and these two work together, then what you do is you surrender to what's in front of you. Because here's the thing, is the divine or God, however you want to look at it, wants you to succeed. Absolutely, it does. It wants you to be connected to it. It loves when you establish that connection, and you keep cultivating it on an everyday basis. And there's a reciprocal relationship between that. That's what we talk about, meeting halfway. All right. And when we establish the positive mindset, we live through our authenticity, and we surrender to our true life's mission and our life's purpose, that God or the divine sees that. And it's like, okay, here, I'm going to start throwing you the bones that you've been asking for now, because that's, we've all had those moments where it's like, come on, divine, throw me a bone right now. That's the ego. And that's because there's an aspect of us that's still not meeting the divine halfway. So that's what it is, guys. It's setting yourself up for that reciprocal relationship with the divine. And that is what's going to help you with this trust in the unknown. And in fact, we're going to go into our next topic because they kind of tie in together. That's why I'm really excited about this show today, is how we become all in. All in on our spiritual evolution, all in with Christ. Okay. And actually what this does is cultivating that trust in the unknown allows us to be all in, because we've set aside our fear. We've set aside the preconceived notions of what this all has to offer for us. We are allowing it to manifest the way that it should for each and every one of us. And so ultimately, when we drop that fear, we step into being all in with Christ and our spiritual evolution, because now we are in that reciprocal relationship with the divine. So this is kind of like this method. Of course, like Dyanna's brought up the stair analogy. It works perfect for this, especially, I guess you
Harry
can say,
Potter
the
stairs. Harry Potter.
Yeah, the revolving Harry Potter stairs. Yes, I was going to throw that in there. And ultimately that's how we become all in. And when we become all in on this too, one of the things I'm going to say is you're going to notice that your want to participate in this false reality is going to dwindle. And almost any time that you try to take a look back, it's almost like you start to see a little bit of like a karmatic slap kind of, because again, like I've talked about that on this show before, the more aware you become also in your spiritual evolution and your walk with Christ, the more you're held accountable for. And this is kind of the increased responsibility that comes along with this. And I've kind of layered it up like this, and I use the psychedelics as the example because it's kind of a good way to work with this. When you have your first mushroom experience or you have your first psychedelic experience, like you're like, wow, like this is beautiful and all this. There's more to this reality than meets the eye. And then you understand this is a spiritual tool. Then the mushrooms are going to hold you accountable at that point. They're going to be like, okay, so now that we're a spiritual tool and that's how we're meant to be used. If you use us for any other reason, we're going to slap the hell out of you. That's just how it goes. Same thing, you can look at that same analogy with your spiritual evolution. Is every time you gain more of a realization, every time you gain more of an awareness towards yourself, your inner workings, and this existence in general, you are going to be held accountable for that. So let's get Dyanna's thoughts on this. We'll pop to Dyanna, then to Don. What does it mean to you to be all in with Christ? Let's just start off there.
Yeah, well, perfect. Exactly it. And like held accountable, that comes down so much to it. And that is the expanse of your spiritual awakening, how much you can be held accountable. And when it comes to Christ and the unknown, well, I'm the prime example. And then Don too, because we're both Canadian. So very similar probably on our very agnostic, atheistic. My dad literally, he didn't say atheist because he didn't even know the term then. It wasn't quite as known then. And he called himself a realist. And he was saying, well, if he does exist, he's done shit for me and he's a fucking asshole. And like, he was real dark about it. His motto was life's a bitch and then you die. Like, for real. Like, so he's suffering his own karma for it now. And he's a very loving person too. He's very generous. He's a very good person. So it just shows how these things can actually plague the best of people. And you see somebody that's probably a starseed himself that could, if he had been a metaphysical minister or even just a minister, could have actually like made enormous shifts and differences. But he became a mechanic because his dad was a mechanic, and he talks often he wanted to be a machinist. Not that he ever talks about pastoring, but he wanted to be a machinist. But he had his own dreams that just he couldn't do because, right? And up comes a bitter person that raises kids that could have stayed bitter if it wasn't for 2012. But luckily, I've woken up, and a lot of my siblings have made big family shifts. So I would say all four of us are at least off the family trajectory to a large degree, which is work until you die kind of thing, and not realize anything much. I mean, they knew about love and everything like that. And I'm only saying their story because it's the story. I was given the story of the average common person with nice, good, loving, trying parents, but extremely freaking bitter because world was very hard. Their upbringings were actually like horrific and like horror movie-ish, which a lot of people from like raised and born 60s prior would have pretty horrific upbringings, right? And then it happens after, but it was commonplace before. And that's in the collective. That's why the star seeds had to come in. That's why the grand convergence had to happen in 1987. And that's me and you and Steven and then all the ones after us. But Dawn came before, Kirsten came before, Sam even got in, squeaked before me. So like there's people that come a little before, but like what we saw after 1987 is why we know that moment right there. And was our moment where the universe was like, you got it, guys. It's already checked marked survival. So we lived through the 90s in this timeline. That's why it was so nihilistic. In the music of the 90s, you can hear it. But people that wave, like there was the people, my husband included, because his brothers are Gen Xers, so he's very Gen X with his music. And he introduced me to all this music that I didn't resonate with at the time, but I actually do now because the collective itself is in that 90s music, Nirvana music phase, all of it. Where before it was just your young Gen Xers. And that whole nihilistic wave is from what I was saying earlier, that bitterness, life sucks, nothing, because that narrative they created for themselves to a large degree, but they weren't the originator. Obviously, I'm never taking the they out of it. There is people that try to perpetuate our narratives. But when we realize and become aware, we actually start to see what, okay, so there's 1% of you, 99% of us, but consciousness only needs 8 to 15%. Let's cut the difference and just say 8 to 15, because I think you get people agreeing in that margin. And then count up all the YouTube and X accounts we've seen and count up all their followers, even assuming a lot of them are the same people cross following. That's getting very freaking close to the amount of people we need, if not already very much there. And now we're just increasing the margin. So when I see people suffering now, I see people that are choosing it versus seeing people suffering even in the 90s. They weren't necessarily so much choosing it because things were still, it was the internet that set us free. Yet the seeds of it were set in 1987, but it birthed after that 2012 and just kept purging and birthing, hashtag me too, like all the things, thanks to the internet, have been purging off those darker layers where you don't need to live there anymore. You never did, but like escaping was less options, put it that way. Where now escape options are everywhere. In fact, they're being screamed at you, like the funeral that's happening today and everything that's been happening. It's not left or right, it's not black or white. It's everything, it's all of it. It's the entire narration was formulated incorrectly. And ironically, because you asked this about Christ, I have a point. Christ came in and told us a very direct message. People came in and pretty much changed it. We could say instantly, but it was actually a couple hundred years later because the original Christ message was picking up, although they did argue amongst themselves, so they hadn't actually perfected it. But you could probably call it closer to what they did in Rome. And we all know that story when they, oh God, then they used it as an enslavement tool instead. But now we know, like, I read the Bible. So from day one, and Martin Luther knew people needed to read the Bible, and that was his big thing to society in the 1500s because the printing press had just come out. So divine again, printing press came out, matched directly with Martin Luther, and out came the first transcribed Bible that was popular. I'm not saying people didn't sneaky do it before, but this is the biggest one, changed into German, so for people to read it. And then very quickly after that, that caught on, and the English people did the Geneva Bible, I think it is, which actually led to King James redoing it himself to tighten it back in. But it was actually more open than it was from when the Catholics had it earlier. They were tricking people. This is what woke Martin Luther up. They were, because he was like a priest, they were tricking people into, but I forget what they called it. It was some kind of ticket to heaven, though, basically. And you could buy a bunch of them. And it, instead of Hail Marys, it was buy tickets to heaven. And you could buy them about people that already died. Oh, I know your mother was a sinner. You better buy her these or she's burning in hell. Purgatory, they'd use purgatory. Though they're stuck in purgatory until you buy that ticket. Yeah, no. So that will came up. But just likewise, what we have now with everything in our political stage, these micro things have been happening throughout time. But what we have right now is, I don't want to say catastrophic in a bad way. I want it cataclysmic. It is the apocalypse. Imagine, like we kept thinking bombs or zombies, but imagine them, but etherically. We are having earthquakes were prophesized. Oh, well, I tell you right now, I feel the earthquakes and I see them sometimes, but they're etheric because the waves of the information have come through that strongly. And Christ, read the Bible yourself. Even if you read any of the versions, he is that powerful that you can get the gist of a good message from it just by reading the Bible. So people have always had the option to read the Bible, even if they wanted to learn Latin before Martin Luther. But they've always had the option to put themselves out there. Some people went and became priests just so they could get educated and learn the Bible. There's always been ways, but the option now is just like pull up my phone and freaking scroll. How do I reach enlightenment? And bam, I've got tons of answers. So nobody has an excuse anymore. Everything is totally about self-awareness and self-responsibility because of the little box I'm talking to you all on right now.
And that is being all in, though. It is. It's understanding you have this, like I said, I've talked about this before. It's not like in the old days where you were trying to reach enlightenment. You had to get on a ship and you had to take like this 4-week voyage across the ocean on this ship to this Himalayan plateau. And then maybe you had to hike that plateau to this monastery that was on the top of a mountain that could have taken you another week in and of itself. And then to get there, just to read one book and just to take in one book. We are in the and this is why spiritual ascension took so long back then, and they say it took many lifetimes because you might have to take a voyage per lifetime just to get the book that you wanted to look at to increase your awareness. But now we have access to everything. All of these books that people had to take long voyages for back then to actually read. So that is being all in, is taking accountability and knowing that you have the access of everything you need to learn here at your fingertips. So absolutely love that, Dyanna. Don, what does it mean to you to be all in with your spiritual evolution and Christ?
I think it is really just, it comes from a place of understanding that everything we are experiencing is being used as like a distraction from our connection to the divine. Like all this stuff with the shooting and the funeral and all of this, it is one giant distraction. And I know everybody says this, but it's to get us, which is the best way to experience the purest version of our reality. Like once you make that connection with the divine, with Christ, whichever way you want to say this, and get away from, peel back all the layers of distraction and everything that's being put in front of us to make us to forget that we do have these connections. It's basically shedding your ego and persona. I know I sound like a broken record about these two topics, but like once you get out of that suit that you're expected to wear by society and find out who you actually are and what you're connected to, and stop giving a shit about like scrolls and all of these views on Facebook, it really doesn't matter. What matters is that connection back to your divine elements to figure out how you can best work within this reality, right? And that's what we're finding on our spiritual remembering, because that's the entire point of it. And I do want to kind of throw something in on that. You were talking about asking the universe to throw you a bone. One of the things I've learned recently is when the universe throws you that bone, accept that bone, acknowledge that bone, and ask the universe for more of that bone, because it will give it to you, right? And when you are connected to the divine and lose the persona and ego, I'm not saying kill your ego. That's not what I'm saying at all. You can work within this reality because your ego is a part of your being, right? You need to learn to work as a partner with it, not like be afraid of it. But your persona is just a bullshit suit that you wear, and that is the thing you do need to shed, right? And when you do that and find out who you really are and what you're connected to, this universe does become your choose your own adventure.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yes, dude, you guys are both on fire today. I love it. So for me, what does it mean to be all in? All right, my definition is this: don't just talk about it, be about it. And that is the number one thing I'm going to say. And it's pretty cut and dry. Everybody knows how I can take a lot of this stuff and make it very cut and dry. But it is. Don't just talk about it, be about it. You know, I don't joke around when I say fuck around and find out is the true road to being a real mystic. Okay. Be the frontiersman. Be the frontier woman, be the one who experiments. Okay. Like we are in an age right now where we have all of these spiritual concepts that are just freaking coming in mass. Okay. Like for instance, like how did I fuck around and find out when it came to Kundalini yoga? Well, I'm seeing everybody says this is taboo, don't do it and all that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to fuck around and find out. I'm going to do it. Okay. And now we see why it's so taboo, because if everybody did it, mental and physical healthcare would be annihilated. We wouldn't need this matrix healthcare for both the mental health and the physical health anymore. It'd be gone. We'd be healing ourselves. That's why it's taboo. This is what it means to be all in, though, dude. Go out, fuck around, find out, experiment, embody the principles on the physical level. Stop trying to escape your humanity. Okay. This is the test, embracing our humanity and embodying these principles into the physical. This is what causes the actualization. This is what causes the realizations within us. And this is what causes us to understand at a deeper level. And like I've said before, the more you understand, the more your reality shifts. So that is being all in to me. We see a lot of people who got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, dude. Get both of your feet in there. That's what I'm going to say, because ultimately this is what we're doing, guys. We have now built a frequency foundation, okay, for the new earth. And now we need to start building the physical foundation for it. And this is what it means to be all in. So don't just talk about it, be about it. Go out, fuck around, and find out. If you see some new spiritual concept or something that's supposed to, dude, embellish yourself in it for a month. Okay, experiment, figure out, because we are the scientists, we are the journalists, we are the creators, the musicians, the artists for the new earth, dude. And this is what it means to be all in, is to just stop talking about it and start to be about it, guys. Like, don't just talk about loving your neighbor. All right. Actually love your neighbor and give your neighbor the compassion and the love that you give yourself. Okay. Don't just talk about being part of a community. Be that person in your community. Be it. Okay. That is all in to me. Okay. We move from talking to doing. We move from talking to being. We move from talking to embodying. Okay. And that's ultimately what makes or breaks this, guys. Okay. So stop trying to run from your humanity and embody. Take every spiritual principle, take every foundational knowing that you have and channel it into every single facet of your existence. Okay. The time for the limp noodle is over. Okay. And that's just how I'm going to put it, guys. That's the best way I can say it, is stop talking about it and be about it. Number one, this is what being all in is, guys. So, and I know everybody here, especially in this chat, they're being about it. Okay. And I'm talking to everybody out there who might be watching, who might be halfway in, and not just stop talking about it and be about it, guys. That's where we're at. Go big or go home, just as Sam said. Exactly. Okay. Stop running from your humanity. Embrace your humanity. That's the biggest test. One of the biggest tests we have here is embracing this experience. And then you take those spiritual principles that you have read about and that you have talked about, and you embody them into your physical body and your physical way of going about this existence, and you cast the divine love into every single facet of your life. Everybody that you talk to, everybody that you touch, hug, whatever it may be. Okay, that's what being all in is to me, guys. Don't just freaking talk about it, be about it. All right. And I don't know. We're going to get some final thoughts because we're going to wrap up a little bit early today. Dyanna, what are your thoughts before we kind of start to head off? I embellished myself in the moment a little there, but it's true.
Good. I love theatrics.
It's true though. It's true. That's the ultimate way we can be all in, is stop talking about it and be about it. So
it's so true. And that's actually like, because I was a theater person. That was my thing once upon a time. And I love, and that's why I didn't like The World, because it seemed boring and lame and everything sucked and everything just, I didn't even care about the evil plots. I was like, there's no one cared that this is just boring. Like, why are we here? It's just not interesting. But when you start to spiritually awaken, it's cliche and cheesy, but you actually can look at a waterfall and see like the totality of existence. And you can have just simpler relationships and really get more gold out of it, because you yourself don't have all like the cheap dopamine that we were talking about. Like, you don't have all these constant demons you need to feed, and you can just be authentic. And that's why you have to live the path to be the path, because everything is played out in your actions and your thoughts. So if you want to be spiritual and you dream of being spiritual, if you're talking about spirituality and all these different concepts, if you're not walking the walk, it doesn't mean anything. And I know that there's tons of people trying. So there is lots of people, because I spent years and years and years trying, but just never forget the most first and fundamental fact that you have to control your thoughts and have them be for your betterment. And that doesn't mean toxic positivity. If something is sad, just say, this is sad. You don't have to go, oh, this is because Stephanie, blah, blah, blah. You just say, this is sad. And just let it be sad, because that's exactly what this is going to be about, changing the old patterns and creating brand new ones, which are going to come from a more positive but authentic lens.
absolutely. And Don, your final thoughts for today before we sign off.
I think my final thoughts on this would be actually a bit of a cheat, a hack, whatever you want to call it, is especially for people like Stephen and I that are still stuck in the 9-to-5 grind and that existence, is you can figure out how much you need to participate in the construct, in the system, and limit it to strictly that, because it is so easy to get wound up in all the distractions and all of the things that pull us away from all of the stuff that we're talking about. It is so easy to get wound up in the anger and the drama in the workplace of the asshole who cut you off and staying in those negative aspects. You can literally choose your involvement. There is a required amount for some of us right now. I understand that. I'm not saying there's not, but you can choose to limit how much beyond that you participate.
Absolutely, man. So we're going to close it off with this. Okay. Your gateway and your keys to having trust in the unknown is, number one, be aware that we as a collective, we like to gravitate around negative thinking and negative thought patterns. Have awareness of that walking into your everyday life. Okay. When you start to see that negativity start to come on, nip it in the bud. You have that power, and start to redirect your mind towards that positive thinking and that positive mindset. Because remember, we don't want to be hitting ourselves with our hammer and our chisel. That defeats the purpose of carving out a beautiful, magnificent reality for us to live in if we're just hitting ourselves with the tools, guys. So that would be the first one. The second one is always live in your authentic light, live out of your heart center. These two are going to work together. Having that positive mind, living in authenticity, and then we are going to gravitate into that surrender, into that reciprocation for what the divine shows us. And then, guys, being all in. Yes, you heard Don and Dyanna. They have many great ways of being all in. Number one thing, I'm going to sum it up for everybody. Don't just talk about it, be about it. Okay. Go out and do the things that you talk about. Embody this into, you can, if you want to be spiritual, there's no more want. Just be a spiritual person. Embody the principles. That's the easiest step any of us can take in moving forward in all of this. So nonetheless, guys, I want to thank all of you for joining us for another Church of True Christ Sunday sermon. Hopefully this was helpful for you. Of course, you can follow me, BGCast, on X, where this is streaming right now, Rumble, and you can follow Don, the After Dark Show. He is more on Facebook, and he is on YouTube as well. And you can follow Dyanna, Transcending Ascension. She's on X, YouTube mostly. Reach out to us if you have any questions, or if you want to talk, or if you even want to come on Church of True Christ one day and have a conversation with us. But nonetheless, guys, my last words for today: go outside, get some sunshine. We're moving into the cold weather season, and with that, I'm going to say, start taking some extra. I know I don't care if you think the vitamin D supplements are toxic. Just trust me on this. Okay, start taking a little bit of extra vitamin D every day. And it's going to help you because we're going into that time where we're not spending as much time outside. But go outside, enjoy this weekend, and have a blessed day, everybody. Take care.